So today at CafeRainyDays, we've got Kavitha Chinnaiyan. Hi, Kavitha.
Hi, Sujata. How are you? Once you get into that rhythm, right, it changes patterns in your brain. And that has been actually shown with functional MRI studies, how Sanskrit chanting actually changes your neural pathways and expands your brain capacity.
We are very lucky to have Kavitha. She's a cardiologist, professor of medicine, and she has studied yoga, Ayurveda, Vedanta, and she's also the founder of the Śabda Institute, through which she teaches, through which she writes, and she writes about various aspects of yoga, Tantra, Ayurveda, Vedanta. I've been reading her book, Heart of Wellness, so really highly recommend it. My usual humble request to please subscribe to the channel. So to jump in straight away, Kavitha, the book, The Heart of Wellness, talks about bliss received. How would you define it? How would you define bliss?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me on CafeRainyDays. It's such an honor and pleasure to be here with you, Sujata. Thank you. The bliss prescription it lays out a way of being. How do I live my life? What kind of, schedule should I follow on a daily basis? Why should I do that? That's all in the first part of the book. And then we take it gradually, one thing after another, change your habits, change your lifestyle, and then get into those deeper parts of the mind, because it's in our lifestyle that most of our unconscious patterns come out. And so when we start changing our lifestyle consciously, then we can start going into the other subtler parts. Start with the gross, get into the subtler parts. So Bliss RX, or the bliss prescription, is really a set of guidelines on how to live your life, to come into this lived experience of what we call bliss. And by bliss here, it's not some vague, blissed out, ecstatic thing. It's really this sense of being grounded and content and happy within yourself, which is really essentially what all of us is always seeking. We're all seeking that sense of completion. We're always like kind of after the next thing, and never be content, right? And we settle for a lot of things and say, well, it's a lot of times when we settle for something, it's a case of sour grapes. I couldn't have that anyway, so I'm going to, resign for this. As humans, we have very, very complicated minds, very, very complicated ways of being, with the majority of our lives being really driven by our subconscious mind. Very little of our conscious way of being is driven by the conscious mind, actually. Our conscious way of being, or what we think is our conscious way of being, is not conscious at all. It's completely unconscious. A lot of times, even the way I might, my body language and the way I move my hands, or the way I speak, or the way I'm looking at you right now, the way I'm postured, the way I am presenting myself to the world, it's completely unconscious. And it's our natural way of being. So the whole point of these esoteric sciences and the traditions is really to, first of all, shine the light of awareness into that unconscious part of the mind, which is like the bulk of the iceberg. Only the tip of the iceberg is what we're conscious of. So all these teachings of the esoteric traditions, be it yoga, tantra, Ayurveda, whatever it may be, it is to bring, first of all, this light of consciousness into these submerged parts of our mind, so that we can consciously start to change that. And so that we're not driven by these patterns that, to put it mildly, these patterns, our subconscious patterns, really enslave us. The whole point of this is to become free of our own slavery.
You also mention how most of your sort of behavior patterns are already set before you are 7. And then, of course, you're thrown into this turmoil at teenage with all your hormones going mad. Yes, of course, work on yourself. But how do you pass this on to children? I mean, similar to somebody like me who is not in the country that you were born and brought up in India, and you want to pass on these traditions to your kids. The kids, of course, are growing up in the Western world. As a parent, how do you act? How do you teach your children?
Yeah, as you know, I'm a parent, and I have two children who are, one is going to be 20, the other is in her late teens. And one thing I have realized, from being a parent and from also working on myself, is that you cannot teach your kids what you are not. The most effective way of instilling anything in anyone is to live it. Because as you know, our children do not take what we say, but they will take what we do and how we are. I truly believe and truly respect Gandhiji's words when he says, be the change you wish to see. Whether it is about cultural values, or it is about humanistic values, or it is about ethical values, whatever it may be, if I don't question my own beliefs, first of all, and then delve deep into my own mind and why I do the things I do, even with my children, I cannot teach them anything. One thing I have also realized in my own inner journey is that in parenting, for instance, it's so obvious, always staring us in the face, is that we don't have all the answers as parents. I think where we really trip up is to pretend like we do. And especially with our children, like as if my life experience is something that they need to live up to. And we may say to our children, well, I want you to have your freedom, but actually we don't internally feel that a lot of times, because we're always preaching from our experience. Thanks to my teachers and my gurus, what I have really learned is how to really let my children be who they are. A lot of times, 90% of the time, it's lip service. Very, very hard to do. And to let your children be as they are means to allow them to make the mistakes that they're going to make, and also to be vulnerable in that place that they can teach me a thing or two. And I don't have all the answers. I don't need to have all the answers. And my cultural beliefs need not necessarily be true. And I'm willing to question all of that, because, that's what yoga is all about. And yoga is not to hold on to one thing and say, you do this because, right? And when it comes to my own rituals and my own spiritual practices, I don't impose that on anyone, even my children, because it cannot be imposed. They have to arrive at it themselves. And they may arrive at it if they see a change in me that they would like to inculcate. And then they come and ask me, Mom, how do I do this that you are able to do? Because see, you see, our children are not fools, right? They can pick up on discrepancies between our inner world and our outer action. If I can use that, my children as my mirrors, and that I'm being discrepant here, I say one thing and I do one thing. And if they point that out and I use that to correct myself, this whole thing is really about empowering yourself and allow the change around you to happen because you have changed yourself. So in other words, there is nothing you can actually do for your children other than to work on yourself, particularly in this day and age when our children are influenced by infinite stimuli all around, right? Social media and their peers and all the information being out as it is. That doesn't mean that they become suddenly all of a sudden, wiser because they have all this information, because still we too have all of this information, but having information is not the same thing as actually working on yourself, which is very, very, very challenging. It's very, very challenging to question your own beliefs, to question your upbringing, to question the things that seem very true in the heat of the moment, which is really our our Kurukshetra, right? Our battlefield. That's a very long-winded answer to a very short question, which is you can't do anything to change your children other than changing yourself. I mean, effectively. Of course, you can enforce and say, oh, I'm going to have these kinds of rules, do this, do that. But, I know from children who have left the house that, okay, they'll do it as long as they're here. But once they leave and they go and live their own lives, all of it will fall away if that change has not happened on a mental, emotional, psychological basis. And that only happens when the change happens within you. And when you change, things around you change. I know that for a fact from having worked on myself and all the work that I do with so many other people.
Talking about changing yourself, me and Kavitha met on a site called AYP, which is run by Yogani. After having meditated and done self-inquiry practices, etc., for so many years, yes, there is a sense of an understanding maybe of I'm not the body or the mind. It can be quite limited where while you're doing your sadhana, you realize, oh yeah, I'm not the body. How do you just rigorously carry on and remind yourself and live it?
For me, the answer has been what I would call Guru Yoga. And that is to continuously be in the zone of my guru, of my teachers. One thing I will say is that there is no substitute, and I guarantee there is no substitute for 99.99% of us. There's no substitute for a guru. Because we can keep fooling ourselves that my intuition is all right. I'm only listening to my gut, but the majority of the times in what we call our intuitions or the guru within us is merely another form of posturing. It's another form of the conditioning that we have taken on. So to have a mirror that's not really invested in you in any other form other than for your growth is a gift. It's a gift of grace. And on the same note, I will say that not all of us are fortunate enough to have that guru. And I know from my own journey that a lot of times we don't have a guru because we're not open to it. People always ask me, how do I find a guru? Well, if you're open to it, you will find one. But more than that, it is that opening to that vulnerability that just I was saying before in your previous question. Yeah. If I'm open to the idea that I can be wrong, and I am wrong, a lot of times with my children, they become my gurus. But if I'm doing that, thinking my children are going to show me something in a particular way, that's not open. Here, openness means this vulnerability to thinking, I'm clueless. And such a thing is very, very hard, particularly for those of us who are intellectuals, because we know, right? As you just said, I know that I'm not the body and mind. And so if somebody tells me that and points that out to me in a very, when I'm particularly contracted, or when I am, in the throes of, showing that I'm something more, I don't want to listen to it because intellectually I know that, but energetically I'm contracted, right? Because it is when this vritti comes up, it is when this contraction comes up that I have the opportunity to break it. But what we do when we don't have that kind of a mirror is we wait for that vritti to go away so that I feel good again. Oh yeah, I'm not the body and mind. But what about that point when I was contracted? Do I want to know that? And a lot of us don't want to know that. That is why we remain stuck. That thing is the hardest thing to break. Because, when people say, oh, yeah, I already know I'm not the body mind, but they continue to act in unconscious ways, right? Because that knowledge remains at an intellectual level. It has not actually percolated into the energetic level, where actually I'm living that even through the infinite contractions of day-to-day life. So what I have seen that works for me is this continuous surrender to, the stream of the guru. Very hard to do when you have a living guru. Very easy to do when you don't have a living guru, or that guru is some ideal who's not going to come in front of you and be in your face. But if you have somebody who's going to be in your face, it's very hard to do. That is what, Tantra really teaches us.
As you were speaking, I was reminded of another thing that I read in your book. You talk about decluttering. Where you say declutter your body and your mind, and declutter your likes. I like this, I have this opinion, I feel this.
That whole book starts with a lifestyle and a diet. And people will say, well, I'm past my likes and dislikes. I'm not this body. And yet you tell them, stop drinking coffee. No, I can't. Stop eating that. What do you mean? Well, if you're not the body, why should it matter? But you see, it has become such an intellectual concept. I'm not this body, but please, may I have my coffee and my fruit and my sweets and my pastries? Because I'm not my body anyway. If you really, truly know you're not the body, you should be able to do anything. You should be able to jump off a cliff with no fear. But all these ideas of not being a body also are very juicy and feel very right and so on. For instance, what happens when you get COVID? What if you need to go on a ventilator? Will you still feel that? Or are you going to fight tooth and nail to stay alive? That very few people, that's why, in the Bhagavad Gita, it says thousands of people come in my search. Bhagavan is telling Arjuna, Krishna is telling Arjuna, out of thousands, not even one will come to me. Thousands may feel they are coming to me, but we're all worshiping the lower gods, right? And intellectualizing, and intellectually we can do whatever. It's quite irrelevant. But whether we can follow through on a day-to-day basis with even simple things, right? That's where that knowledge becomes embodied. And for that, it really does take a discipline. It's very easy to not be disciplined at all and to be loosey-goosey and say, I'm not the body anyway. There has hardly been one yogi who is not disciplined or didn't come to that point of no discipline through, without any discipline. It really does take quite a bit to arrive at a point where no discipline is required. We start there because it's very attractive and say, oh, I'm not the body. But ask somebody like that to leave one thing and they'll have an issue with that.
I recently attended a workshop with Kavitha called the Rasa Workshop. One of the discussions revolved around the fads that come into the health world, superfoods or smoothies or juices, or soak this and drink that in the morning and have gallons of water. It's the flavor of the month. And then we are told this is good for you. And we're just following it because some WhatsApp or some YouTube video told us about this. And I would like for you to talk about it, Kavitha.
When it comes down to, dietary principles, I'm presuming that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Here, from the standpoint of Ayurveda, it's really not what you eat that matters. It's the condition of your Agni that determines whether what you're eating or what you're consuming is actually going to be of benefit to you. So whether you take a keto diet or you take the protein diet or you take whatever it may be, you see that it can become a fad, and then hundreds or thousands of people can go on it. But that diet never works on everyone. It'll work on a section of people, and then the other section, it doesn't work. If all it depended on was what you eat, even like the so-called Mediterranean diet. A lot of people are on Mediterranean diets and they still get cancers and heart disease and so on. So why? I mean, if the diet itself is so good, how come it's not working for everybody? And that has to do with Agni, the concept and the principle of Agni, which is the power of transformation. It's the state of your Agni that makes a difference on whether whatever you're eating is really beneficial to you. And by Agni here, I don't mean fire. Most people think fire. It is the power of transformation. So when you have a strong Agni, then you can eat whatever, and you'll be able to extract just the right nutrients out of it. If your Agni is not optimal, if it is not healthy, or if it is not able to extract things, it won't matter whether you eat grass. You'll still not be able to extract the nutrients out of it. So the whole principle of diet in Ayurveda is actually about strengthening your Agni. So it is not really about what you eat at all. The prescription for what to eat is given simply to, strengthen your Agni. Ayurveda doesn't really go into carbohydrates, proteins, minerals, none of that. It's entirely about creating an environment within yourself where whatever you eat, whatever you're consuming, and by the way, it's not only what you're eating, it's whatever you're consuming through your senses, it is being processed in an optimal way. So when we talk about, whether getting up and drinking a whole bunch of water, eating this that you saw on WhatsApp, I call it the WhatsApp University. People just forward things and think that is the next best thing to do. It's very problematic because we are not even aware of what our bodies are capable of doing. And also, the whole point of this Agni, right? One way to scientifically or understand it in modern medicine times is that when we say Agni, it is the optimal way in which the nervous system is firing, the optimal way in which the glands are secreting chemicals, including hormones and neurotransmitters, in such a way that those digestive juices and those hormones and those neurotransmitters are working at their optimum. And that is really what we're talking about Agni here. And that's the whole part of the first part of Heart of Wellness, where it discusses that. Drinking a bunch of water in the morning may not necessarily be good for somebody who has a weak, for instance, a weak adrenal gland. And when you say a weak adrenal gland, it's not really about, okay, should I go and get tested for this or that hormone? No, because your hormones or the glands in the body are producing these chemicals on a moment-to-moment basis. It's in stimulus. So I'm talking to you right now, there are certain chemical reactions going on. When I'm finished talking, these reactions will no longer be present. They will just die off. So like my thyroid is active, my pituitary is active, my adrenal is active, just to produce this much speech, to produce this much thought, and to bring, to convert this knowledge that is latent into dynamic knowledge where I'm able to express it, and yours to be able to listen to it and formulate more questions. But once this conversation is over and we go into another realm, this is done. So if you measure something even 2 hours from now, it will not be true for what happened right now. So it's not something that can be measured. It's not abnormal. However, what happens is it creates a cumulative effect. So something I did 20, 23, 25 days ago will start to manifest now because of this, tiny, tiny, tiny changes through the system. And at this point, I will not be able to look back and say that caused this, because one has led to another, to another, to another, to another. It's like a dynamo effect. Here, that's why we have such a strong, a very recommended discipline, in the bliss prescription. Say, do only this for a while where you can establish a baseline. Unless you establish a baseline, you will not know what the spikes are. If you have a chaotic baseline, it won't matter. Whatever you do, right? You will not really be able to tell whether it is that hamburger that caused it, or you yelling at your child that caused it, or something you did, 3 weeks ago, you went and swallowed some water in a lake or something. You don't know what caused what because your baseline is chaotic. But if you have a steady baseline, then I can say, well, yesterday morning, I did that, which deviated from my discipline. And now I can see its effect. So even this concept of rasa, to be able to experience something on an esoteric level, can't happen if we are chaotic. Establishing the baseline is really everything, especially on a physical level, because we're always seeking the esoteric and kind of bypassing the physical. Never happens. even these esoteric concepts can only be experienced in an embodied Atma, right? You can't become disembodied and experience something. Even rasa, to experience rasa, you have to be embodied. Embodied means you have to follow the principles of the body. There is just no escaping it, one way or the other. Does it make sense?
It does make a lot of sense. And what I was also remembering is, normally when you sort of read books on Ayurveda, it can get really complicated. What Prakriti am I? And I've noticed that in your book, you give a very basic guideline. We all know we should be sleeping at a certain time. We all know we should be waking up at a certain time, have some sort of a routine, eat early. We all know that, but it's laid out in a good way. And so something else that, again, I wanted to talk to you about. I'm fascinated by this concept of macrocosm, microcosm, and how sort of the earth has its own Prakriti, the universe has its own Prakriti, we have our own Prakriti, and then there's these bacteria that are within us which have their own Prakriti. The viruses come and go and they have their own. And it's like, we're really like Russian dolls, isn't it? How each of this is affecting each other. And maybe I'm all these bacteria and viruses and whatever I'm interacting with. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Oh, that's a fascinating topic. I mean, with all the research there is on microbiomes, for instance, we can safely say that maybe what we are is our microbiome, right? Mm-hmm. And particularly with a lot of the research now with the association of microbiomes with mental health or with brain health, and why some people get Alzheimer's, some don't. And another way of understanding Agni is through the microbiome. You are your Agni. In other words, what we have been saying is, even with regard to Agni, right? If you equate Agni with microbiomes, it becomes even more clear.
That just remind us, Kavitha, what microbiome is. Just very basic.
Yeah. So what we mean by microbiome is that exactly what you were saying, that we have a whole host of bacteria, different types of bacteria in the gut, in the body, in different systems, and the health of our overall health is actually dependent on these sets of bacteria and how they function. So when you take probiotics, prebiotics, you're actually trying to influence the microbiome in the gut or in some other part. But primarily the gut is really, what we are finding with modern medicine is that whether it is association with heart disease or brain health or with cancers or many other diseases, including perhaps, infections, is that it's associated with the microbiome, as in whatever is going on in your gut is going to influence whether or not you get certain types of diseases and also how you respond to those diseases. In other words, again, it's about Agni. Agni is what we have been talking about, is that even with regard to diet and how you respond to certain diets, if your microbiome is healthy, you can handle any diet. If it's not, you can't. You can be on what you think is a clean diet. It won't matter because your very foundation is actually unsettled. When we talk about microcosm and macrocosm, it really doesn't take too much analysis to see this association. Whatever is going on within us is what is projected outside. So I'm sure everybody has had an experience where, I'll give you a very relevant example. For those for anyone who has Siri, or you have a smartphone, or you have a smart device, you just look at something. You say you're searching for something. The next thing you know, all of your searches will be filled with that. Your social media, those are the kinds of ads you'll start getting. Amazon will start recommending those things for you. Google will start recommending those things for you. That is exactly what happens in our personal experience as well. Whatever is in my internal landscape is what is going to be projected outside. It's quite fascinating how that happens, actually. You change your mindset, that's what you'll start to see in the world outside you. You change the way you think about something, the whole universe conspires to only present that to you. You'll think, this set of people are suspicious. You'll only see those people in your consciousness. You'll only learn to focus on that. And it all happens at a subconscious level. We are not even conscious. So whatever my belief and my bias is, that's what I will see. And when I change that to another bias, another belief, I'll start to see that. I think of it as this great Siri that's listening all the time. It's like the universal Siri that's listening and presenting exactly those things. So that is the reflection of the microcosm and the macrocosm. You know what? The mistake we make is we look at that and think my thinking is influenced by that. Actually, that's not the case. The way I think is what is projected outside. Just like this, you search for something and everything's in your feed starts to reflect that. That's exactly how it happens. But if you look at that feed and say, well, that's why I'm thinking about this, that's actually not true at all. Try it and see. Change your thinking to something and you'll only start to see that. You start believing, I have this highly developed intuition. I am this amazing person. I have this spiritual ability. Everything in your consciousness will start to actually project that back to you. So you reinforce that thinking when it may not be true at all. And then, that's what we also call synchronicity. Synchronicity is really this reflection of the microcosm in the macrocosm.
Isn't it two ways? So
it is always two ways. It is always two ways. But whatever is in my internal landscape is what will be projected in my life. So one thing I tell my students is examine your life. Take a good long look at your life because you have manifested it. We never want to believe that because I would like to think that my life is actually a result of, being a victim to my circumstances. But that's not true at all. How powerful we are is that we manifest the life that is within us. Whatever is internal, that is exactly what will be manifested outside. That's how much power we have. And for that, to actually understand that, first, we have to stop being the victim. That's the hardest thing to do because it's far easier to blame circumstances. And that is the whole teaching of karma, actually, in our tradition, is if we understand karma really well on a very deep cellular level, we stop being the victim.
But of course, we use it as an excuse that, that's my karma, or it's hereditary, so I've got it, or
exactly.
I've been
and that is all victimization. Or it's sour grape. Self-pity, self-blame, none of that is actually going to work, in understanding this micro and macrocosm. And I'm a Śrīvidyā upasaka. So for me, the greatest understanding of this oneness of micro and macrocosm comes from the Śrīcakra or the Śrī Yantra. And that is the perfect, teaching of this oneness between the micro and the macrocosm. And that's really the topic of my book, Fractals of Reality.
You talked about being a Śrīvidyā upasaka. For the benefit of the audience, you've done so much of chanting and shloks and lots of Sanskrit chanting. Where did it begin? What sort of benefits do you see from it? What level as well? Is it just from the chanting? Is it from the vocalizing that you see the effects, benefits, or is it also from understanding it and living it? So many questions around the chanting. Let's begin by how did it begin?
I was very fortunate because I was kind of pulled into it when I was in high school. So in 8th grade. And it was just one of those things. My math teacher in my high school was also a Sanskrit pundit. I was new to the school. She one day just came in and called me out of class and said, I'm going to start teaching you how to chant the Bhagavad Gita for competition. So she started teaching me. She's also a Vedantin, and she started to call me to her house so she could
Wow.
teach me different things, and the Bhagavatam, stories from the Bhagavatam, and Vedantic concepts. This was when I was in high school. I just took to it like, a fish takes to water. I just loved that chanting and that immersion in the Bhagavad Gita so much that when I left that city. I went to medical school and then came to the US. I just carried that with me. So whatever she had taught me about the rules of chanting and so on, I would, I learned to chant other chapters of the Bhagavad Gita using that. And it just, fueled my interest in this whole thing to a very large extent. And that's when I started studying Advaita Vedanta, started studying yoga really on a deep basis. And chanting has different effects actually, because it is the precision. It depends on what you're chanting. We talk about Vedic chanting. It has a lot of rules. It's a very rigid system, depending on the shaka and where, which shaka you're learning from. There is an incredible joy in that discipline of learning to chant complex things. It's just like dinacharya, just like the diet I was talking about. You have to go through the pain of understanding the different rules of Sanskrit, the rules of chanting in order, and then, keep practicing until it becomes easy. And then when it becomes too easy, you move on to another difficult chant. And then you learn that. And so, like the Bhagavad Gita is relatively easy compared to, for instance, the Devi Mahatmya. Much more difficult. The words kind of are hard to put together. But that requires that external chanting of understanding the rules and chanting externally. And once you get into that rhythm, right, it changes patterns in your brain. And that has been actually shown with functional MRI studies, how Sanskrit chanting actually changes your neural pathways and expands your brain capacity. When we say brain capacity, it expands your ability to hold things in your experience. One way of saying that is that one of the types of Agni is strengthened in that type of chanting. And also, these people who take to chanting as a very serious practice, they have to adhere to a very disciplined lifestyle. They wake up early in the morning, they take a bath, they do this, they do that. And because the chanting has become your sadhana, it is your practice. And so you see, all aspects of your life are changed as a result of this. You would think you're only chanting, but a lot of other things are also changing. And you don't want to waste energy talking about, irrelevant things. So you start decluttering. Everything goes together because your lifestyle has to change. If you want to really become good at Sanskrit, Vedic chanting, you have to declutter your life. You have to preserve your voice. You don't gossip. You don't do, because you lose your power when you do such things. And you become very internally focused. Day in and day out, you're practicing it in your mind. See how disciplined you become. One thing informs everything else. So I love chanting as a part of my sadhana. And I enjoy it very much because that was my introduction to spirituality and to this. And I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly refining Vedic chanting because I like it, and making mistakes and refining and then making other mistakes and so on.
Yeah, beautiful, really beautiful. You mentioned, after all, this is your Kurukshetra, and I wanted to talk about, in any tradition really, but because you and me both come from an Indian background, all these mythologies, yes, as children we've learned them as stories, but how do you dig down and give us an example of a simple story that we may have heard of, but really understanding the esoteric meaning, the layers of what it really means. And I'll give you the example of a discussion that you and me had online. And this was to do with the asuras and the devas have the manthan.
Amruta Mathanam. Yeah, you brought the example of Amruta Mathanam, and I know that many, many years ago, I actually wrote a blog post on it based on your request.
Completely
It's actually one of my favorite stories in the Bhagavatam, and it has many layers of meaning, and I use it as an example a lot when I'm teaching with different insights in different aspects of it. Maybe your viewers know this story. It is, the devas lose to the asuras in one of these great, in one of their constant battles. So the devas are the forces of harmony. Asuras are the forces of disharmony. And there's always a conflict between them. Sometimes asuras win, sometimes devas win. And basically they're a reflection of our internal, our microcosm. So in this story, the devas lose, and they are ousted out of their heavenly duties, so to speak, and they go to Brahma, and Brahma takes them to Vishnu, and Vishnu says, "Yeah, I know how to solve this problem. You all need the nectar of immortality." And everybody is interested, and he says, well, I know that the asuras also are going to be interested in this nectar of immortality. So why don't we call all of them? And then maybe you all can work together towards this goal of getting this nectar of immortality. And the story unfolds from there. Of course, the asuras are interested. And then, they come up with a plan of actually bringing this huge Mandara mountain, putting it in this ocean, and they bring the snake, Vasuki, and Vasuki becomes the rope, and then one side is pulling this way, one side is pulling that way, and they realize that they can't really move the mountain; it's unstable. So Bhagavan Vishnu takes the Kurma Avatara, and he lies as a tortoise under the mountain, so that churning becomes easier. And then they get tired, so he says, "No, it's okay. I'll help." And he's sitting on the mountain, and he's actually doing all the work, and they think they're doing it. And then they start, and then Vasuki starts spewing out all of this venom because he does not like to be churned, and there's a lot of heat generated within him. And Vishnu, everybody runs away from this, and then Vishnu goes to Lord Shiva. He's the only being in the entire creation who can do something about it. And Shiva nonchalantly says, "Sure, I'll help." And then gathers up all of this venom from Vasuki, and he consumes it. And he is the yogi who has the capability of holding that in his throat and becomes Nilakantha, which means he doesn't allow it to go down. It doesn't allow that venom to percolate his system. He can just hold it there without processing it. And then they continue to do that, and all kinds of gems come out of it. Uchasravas, the white horse, the magical horse comes out of it. Airavata, the elephant, comes out of it. And Mahalakshmi comes out of it. And then everybody is lusting after her. She says, "I don't want any of you." And she only has a drishti for Mahavishnu and goes and becomes established in his heart. And finally, Dhanvantari comes out with this nectar, Amrutam. And again, Vishnu, see, it's all his Maya, because he's the one who, comes up with this plan. He's the one who assembles the devas and asuras. He's the one who convinces Vasuki. He's the one who takes the Kurma Avatara. He's the one churning. He's the one creating all the conflict, and he's the one resolving all the conflict. And then he takes the Mohini Avatara and starts giving the venom the Amrutam to everybody. And Rahu and Ketu are created in that process. So a lot of things happen in this, which are really deeply insightful. First of all, of this understanding that I do nothing. I'm not the doer at all. It's Bhagavan is the one who's creating all this. He's the one churning this great ocean of samsara. He's the one that brings the gems. He's the one that brings the venom. Understanding that, is a huge lesson in surrender. So there is that. And then, when you think about it on an esoteric level, it's this churning that occurs in our sadhana, providing all these gems. And what we will do for that nectar of immortality. For the nectar of immortality, we have to be able to hold the venom here without it being processed anywhere. As in, we are able to become equanimous. For Shiva, it does not matter whether he takes Amritam or he takes Visha. He can take both because he is supremely equanimous. To be able to take the Visha into ourselves, but have it not change us, have it not go beyond that. We have to take the experience. And how will that experience actually change in the throat? Because here is the Vishuddhī-chakra. Can that be transformed into Vishuddhi, the all pure? Can we take the Visha, the venom of our experience, and can it be transformed into Shiva? So my guru, he always says, Sumitji, he always says, there is no Shiva without Visha. Shiva, Visha. There is no Shiv without Vish. You have to take that venom. And that venom actually takes you to Shiva. And that happens at this Vishuddhī-chakra. So when you even thinking about Kundalini and chakras, it's a huge, actually, analogy even to that. And then Mahalakshmi. Everybody is hankering after Mahalakshmi. She doesn't care. She will not go to a Deva. She will not go to an Asura. She only goes where Vishnu is. So, they say, right, if you want Lakshmi in your life, you have to be devoted to Vishnu. And if you have to be devoted to Vishnu, you have to surrender there. Because otherwise she leaves. She's not interested in harmony and disharmony. She only wants to go where he is. So is he my primary focus, or is harmony and disharmony my focus? So many insights from just this one story. I could write a book on it.
Yeah. So what's your take on Dhanvantari coming up last?
Yeah, Dhanvantari coming, he is the last one to come, right? He brings the Amrutam, and then, that Amrutam is really the nectar of immortality, right? And we can't even come to that understanding of immortality until we have taken the venom. And then we can understand immortality. And all of these also have hormonal implications. Each of these things, we can think of it from the standpoint of a hormone, from the standpoint of a neural pathway, from the standpoint of a neurohormonal pathway. What does, this white horse mean? What does this Ayurveda mean? In our internal experience, which is completely driven by neurohormonal pathways, chemicals. So what does that mean? We could have so many correlations there. And then, Mohini, even after you get the Amritam, you still have to deal with Mohini. Delusion, Maya is all powerful. She can still feed the Asuras, right? Within us. So it's not that getting the Amrita is everything. You will always have to bow down to Mohini. As long as you're seeking that Amritam, right? You will always be on the good and bad side. But if you are Shiva, it won't matter. So many gems, in this single story. Wow.
Just more on a personal level. Where did this longing begin? What sort of grace, what experience did you have that sort of egged you on? Treat it as, how the autobiography of a yogi has been an incentive to so many to go on the path.
Everything is grace. Everything is grace, and who knows why some people are pulled into it, who knows why some people are not. It's all anugraha. There is no single incident that stands out in mind. I mean, there's a series of things. And, the problem with narrating mystical experiences is that, and this has happened to me too, when people speak about their, like reading autobiography of a yogi, it was like, why isn't this happening to me? And, what do I lack? And so we can go into that mindset. And also, see, mystical experiences come and go. A mystical experience, everybody has it. Some people are aware of it and some people are not aware of it. Some people make a lot of it. Some people just ignore it. Mystical experiences don't really determine whether one is going anywhere on the spiritual journey. What really makes a difference is how your life is changing. Your moment to moment, your ordinary, mundane life as you're going about. Because you can have a mystical experience and be a total jerk to your family, to your, and be oblivious to, all these unconscious patterns within yourself and keep explaining it away in some esoteric mystical fashion. That is not the kind of spirituality I'm into, fortunately, because of my gurus. So here it is really all about, becoming completely congruent. Your word, your speech, your thought, and your action being straight as an atom. No manipulation of experience. No posturing, internally or externally, which is what we all do on a constant basis. And emptying yourself of that is really what spirituality is all about. Mystical experiences, you can sit down to meditate, have a wonderful experience, and then what? For instance, if I'll have students who are trying to stick to their viewpoints, I'll say, fine, I agree with you. Now what? You stick to your viewpoint. You feel great for having been right, but are you free? For me, the spiritual path is really a path to freedom. And freedom is a word that should be taken very seriously. Freedom from what? Freedom from myself, from my own tightly held patterns. For me, it has always been kind of this questioning the logical, intellectual mind that got me here. And to realize that the logical, intellectual mind only gets you so far. Beyond that, it's really everything is about surrender.
So what would you say what is the aim of sadhana? So when you sit down to meditate, or when you try and sort of change your life, why are you doing it? When I say you, I mean not just you, anybody.
Yeah. That's the most important question to ask. That's the question everybody should ask. I mean, thousands, millions of people actually meditate for this or that, right? They meditate because they want to be stress-free. They meditate because it's the cool thing to do. Who knows? I mean, who knows why people do what they do? But for each person, the question always should be, why am I doing anything? It's not just meditating. Why am I sitting like this? Why am I doing this? And, I always give the example of what, how, and why. Okay. So the what is Kriya Shakti, the power of action. The how is the power of knowledge, Jnana Shakti. The why is what determines your Ichcha Shakti, your intention. For instance, the Heart of Wellness is not a diet book. It doesn't promise, you won't lose weight in 21 days. Nothing might change for you in 40 days or whatever, right? But you see that our modern culture is really focused on what and how. Right? We want to keep doing what somebody else is doing, or we have the knowledge of how to do something, how to do a diet, how to do this, how to, live in the world. We hardly question why. And the why is where that subconscious mind lies. Like, why do I even want to do that? Is it because I want to appear as a spiritual person? Now, I'll tell you one thing. Yes, we may be seeking God, but God has a different connotation in every person's mind. Some people are allergic to the word God. Some people, go in tears when they hear God, right? So for me, meditation has never really been about being stress-free. It is not about anything else. It is, and you can say, well, it is about finding peace. Okay, what does peace mean to you and why do you want it? Because if you really want something and you define your why, right, your how and your what will change. Because if I truly want peace, and I have really sat down and contemplated why I want peace, I will start to declutter my how and my what. I will stop doing things that don't bring me peace. I will start to understand what peace actually means to me. You can't lie on, this is what I'm saying, right? The what and the how are in that conscious mind, which is the tip of the iceberg. The why is what we need to question. That is where the real change happens. This is why you can go on a diet, you lose the weight, you stop the diet, you gain all the weight back because you haven't questioned the why. Why do you want to lose weight? Why? And if that is to appear a certain way to somebody, my self-image, this and that, at least we need to be honest with that. But what happens is, first of all, we don't question it. And when we do question it, we just reason away what is already there rather than questioning the belief. Oh, why? Because, being overweight is bad. Do you know that? Do you actually believe that? And can you question that belief? Is that even true? We hardly ever question our beliefs. Our why remains in the realm of explaining the real why. So questioning our beliefs is the first step to making any meaningful transformation. And so for me, spirituality, sadhana, everything is about that. It's about changing my why. Because what I'll do otherwise is, if my why remains unquestioned, sure, I can let go of a materialistic persona and take on a spiritual persona. Now I'm not a regular jerk, I'm a spiritual jerk, right? And you're just rearranging the debris. That's not the purpose of sadhana. Should actually change you. It should change your why. It should make you go deeper and deeper within yourself, where you are continuously removing everything that is not you. And that can't happen if you don't question that. So the most fundamental question anyone should ask is, why am I doing this? Why should I meditate? Why should I have a morning routine? Why should I do anything? Why should I have, whatever, bulletproof coffee, whatever it is that people are into? Why? You should ask that. And when you get the answer, you should ask why. The next step of why. Actually, this process is it's not a simple linear thing. It's a very holistic process. And that's what my program, it's called the Renegade Method. It's a method of self-inquiry. That's what it's based on. How to really get deeper into self-inquiry. And this is a program that, this is a system I teach my long-term students. We have a retreat coming up, open to everybody, and only taught in person because you need to go through your own process. And if you want true freedom, if you want true transformation, that's what needs to happen.
So you were saying the most important question is why, and you need to constantly question, why am I sitting like this? Why am I doing this? Why am I saying this? And of course, for that, you need awareness. In many ways, that's my destination as well, isn't it?
Yes.
And my journey as well, because without awareness, I can't travel towards awareness.
Yeah, everything is about cultivating awareness. And that is the biggest sadhana, cultivating awareness. Rituals, practices, meditating, doing a bunch of pranayama, doing asanas, all that is fine. But cultivating awareness of why I'm doing this and how it's changing me. Am I actually changing, or am I rearranging the debris? That's something that I need to be really radically honest and authentic with myself about. That's the power of having a teacher who can keep pointing out where I'm rearranging the debris.
Beautiful, Kavitha. Thank you so much. Last request. It would be so nice to end with any chant, any shloka, any stotra.
Would you like to do something with the Durga Suktam? So the Durga Suktam is a short kind of chant. We could certainly do that if you like.
Okay. And quickly tell us what it means, and then let's end up with the Suktam, which would be great.
Yeah, and actually I have a class on this. It's available, and I can send you the link. It's really everything that we have been talking about, Agni, right? It is honoring this aspect of transformation as Durga. Since Navratri is coming up in a few days, that might be good. Jatavedase sunavamaso mamarati yato nidahati vedaha Sanapparashadati durgani vishvat Shamatdevo atiduritatyagnihi Tam agnivarnan tapasajvalantim vairochanim karma phaleshu chushtam Durgan Devi Gum Sharanamaham Prapadye Sutarasi Tarase Namaha Agne Tvam Parayanavyo Asman Swasti Bhirati Durgani Vishva Pushcha Prithvi Bahulana Urvi Bhavato Kayatanaya Yashayyo Vishwanino Durgaha Jata Veda Sindhunna Nava Duritati Parshi Agne Atrivan Manasagrinano Smakam Bodhya Vitatanuna Pridhana Jigatum Sahamana Mugram Agnigum Huvema Paramat Sadasthat Sanapparashadati Durgani Vishvakshamaddevo Atiduritatyagnihi Pratno Shikhamidhyo Advareshu Sanachahota Navyascha Satsi Swancha Agne Tanuvam Piprayasvasmabhyancha Saubhagamaya Jasva Gobhirjushta Mayujo Nishik Tantave Vishnoranushancharema Nakasya Prishtamabhisambasano Vaishnavil Loka Ihamadayanta Katyayanaya Vidmahe Kanyakumari Dhimahi Tanno Durgit Prachodayat Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Ah, beautiful. It was so beautiful, and thank you for sort of quickly complying with my request. Thank you so much, Kavitha.
Thank you for having me. Take care. Thank you, Sujata.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, Kavitha. Thank you very much.
Bye.